I am Councillor Peter Lewis, Chair of the Fire Authority. I welcome everyone to today's Fire Authority meeting, where we are all attending remotely. For the benefit of the webcast, members of the Fire Authority are indicated by an asterisk, and officers of the Fire Service, officials, and independent members of the Standing Committee are also joining this meeting. And I welcome Julia Hughes and Gareth Pritchard. All microphones will be muted unless you wish to speak. Please indicate if you wish to speak by using the raised hand function found by clicking the participants icon on your screen. At the appropriate point, I will call out your name and you will need to turn your microphone on. If you have cause to leave the meeting, can you ensure that you have turned your microphone and video off? And can I remind all members to choose their language of choice if they haven't already done so, as translations facilities are available. So if I could move on now to the agenda, and apologies. I've had apologies from Councillors Jason Parry, Sue Lloyd-Williams, Adrian Townsley, and I'm aware that Ian Dunbar will have to leave the meeting earlier than our conclusion. So any other apologies for members? I don't see any raised hands, thank you. Move on to item 2, declarations of interest. Any members got any declarations of interest to declare? No, I think not. I haven't been advised of any urgent matters under item 3. So let's move on to item 4, minutes of the meeting held on the 20th of September 2021. I'll go through them page by page. Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, page 11, page 12, page 13. I'm sure members have read them. Would we propose them as a true record, please?
I'll move, Chair.
Thank you. Second? Thank you, Mary. You just raised your hand then to approve them. Okay, thank you, members. Any matters arising? Aren't on the agenda? No, I see no raised hands. So we now move on to Chair's report. So apart from the regular meetings with the Deputy Chair and the Chief Fire Officer, we attended the Emergency Services Carol Services at the Cathedral last Monday evening, and it really was a pleasure to be out and to see people face to face after a significant period of time. So along with the Deputy Chair, we have been involved with the Chief Fire Officer on the recruitment process for the Deputy Chief Fire Officer and Assistant Chief Fire Officer, which I will report on later. I have attended 2 North Wales Regional Leadership Board meetings recently, which highlighted again the considerable pressures on social care, both in finance and recruitment. In addition, we received presentations from the Health Board on their clinical services strategy and the policing priorities of the Police and Crime Commissioner. The second was a meeting with the Health Ministers, Lynette Morgan, Julia Morgan, and Lynn Neagle, outlining our request to address the ongoing considerable pressure. It also gave me the opportunity to pursue the case for the fire service assisting with falls at home and associated funding. The Chief Fire Officer and myself met with the Chief Executive and Chair of the Health Board to hear of their future strategy plan and ways in which we could work collaboratively in the future. It was the most positive meeting, already resulting in us providing assistance to them. The Deputy Chair, Michael Dixon, and myself met at Audit Wales to answer their questions on their environmental strategy and our perceived greatest risk at not reaching the Welsh Government's target of 0 by 2030. And that main risk was our availability of suitably fueled appliances in the short time frame, or the significant effect on future budgets because of their cost. And I know the Chief Fire Officer and I will be pursuing this with the Deputy Ministers, our future meeting. So that concludes my report. I'll answer any questions if members wish to raise any. No, I have no questions. Thank you. So I'm now going to move on to item 7, but before I actually ask Helen MacArthur to present this, I just wanted to let members know that this is Ken Finch's final meeting as our Treasurer. And Ken has held this role now for 25 years, since the formation of the Fire Authority back in 1996. Now, I think members, and there are many that have been here longer than me, will have appreciated that Ken's reports have always been easy to read, if not always understood, particularly on treasury management and prudential indicators and their complexity. But I do know that Chief Fire Officers and staff have valued his wise counsel and guidance over those years, and his liaison with local authority S151 officers really has soothed the way for our budget each year. So Ken, it remains for me to thank you on behalf of Fire Authority members, both present and past, for the sterling job you've done in supporting the Fire Authority over those 25 years. And can I wish you well for the future, and may Everton give you more pleasure than of late. So I don't know whether or not you want to respond to that, Ken, before I ask Mary, who I suspect wishes to add his comments too. So maybe I'll take Mary first.
Diolch yn fawr, Mr. Cadeirydd. Wel, dim ond i ategu bob peth da chi wedi dweud, Mr. Cadeirydd, ac diolch I Ken am y gwaith gwych mae wedi wneud. Dwi'n nabod oes adeg Colwyn, Cyngor Colwyn, ac mae wastad wedi dangos I hun yn swyddog ardderchog i'r gwaith. Dwi'n cydweld â chi, da ni'n wastad wedi deall beth sy'n cael ei gyflwyno wrach, ond mae o ar y trywydd iawn bob tro. Gai ddiolch yn fawr I chi, Ken, am bob peth a cymwch ofal a bob dymuniad da i'r dyfodol.
Thank you, Mary. Ken, did you want to say anything, or are you just going to wave your hand to thank us? Okay, well, I'm now going to invite Helen then to make the presentation of the provisional outturn 2021-22.
Thank you, Chair, and Borodar Pawb. I'm going to start with the provisional outturn for this financial year, and it's the first paper on the agenda today, first financial paper. What the paper aims to do is set out the financial performance and position for the authority during the financial year, and also provide a forecast for the full year. I'll start with the revenue. The net revenue budget requirement for this year is 37 million, and our current assessment is that this will be achieved. However, I think it's fair to say that due to the ongoing pandemic issues, we've once again experienced significant variances between the budget headings. I know we've discussed this before, but what I'd like to do is take a few minutes to outline some of the key areas of expenditure. Our staff costs account for 70% of our net expenditure, and when the budget was set, members will recall that our planning assessment for this year was that a cost of living pay award of approximately 2% would be incurred. We are subject to national pay negotiations, and these have been agreed for firefighters at 1.5%, which is below the planning assessment, but the award for staff employed under local government contracts has not yet been agreed nationally. The latest pay offer was 1.75%, but this has been rejected, and the unions are currently balancing on potential strike action. So I think that situation is very much evolving, and we'll know more in the new year. We're still hopeful, though, that a settlement can be agreed. During the financial year, we've been able to progress with recruitment to firefighter apprentice roles. Our members will recall that this was something that we had to stop last year due to the pandemic. This year, we've taken on 18 new recruits, which is really positive. We've also recruited to retained roles, although the retention has continued to be a significant challenge for us. Within the prevention and corporate service departments, we were able to commence our recruitment, but overall this remains quite a difficult time, as I'm sure that you'll recognise from your own authorities. The budget underspend in relation to pay has been utilised to address some of our non-pay challenges that we are experiencing. These are general inflationary uplifts, and we spoke about that at length last time. Fuel costs, both in terms of the pump prices for our vehicles, but also fuel costs in terms of electricity and gas also. We've also incurred additional expenditure for computer licenses and maintenance, and we've moved as an organisation to Microsoft 365. That work is ongoing and will be completed this financial year. We've also continued to incur costs associated with higher levels of PPE than we would normally need. And we've also had to catch up on the repairs and maintenance of our buildings. And you recall from previous updates that during the pandemic, we stopped all maintenance to ensure the integrity of our buildings. Our income is slightly above target, and what that recognises is both income on our buildings, but also it recognises that we've had income from Welsh Ambulance in respect of our deployment of staff. In addition to that, we've received additional income relating to the training costs associated with our apprentices. That's very much positive because we're able to draw down on the apprenticeship levy. The outturn includes a transfer of just about 100,000 to earmarked reserves, and then that again is due to delayed costs arising from the pandemic. I think it's fair to say that the impact of COVID has been most pronounced in our capital programme. Initially, our capital programme for this year was 3.1 million, and that was approved in November last year. We're currently anticipating that the outturn will be in the order of 1.2 million, and what that reflects is that the new fire appliances will not be received until May, and that's the next financial year. We've also experienced some delays in our capital works, namely around the erection of 2 new towers. And by way of an assurance to members, that work is still very much, it will take place. It's just due to the ongoing availability of steel and availability of contractors, it has been delayed slightly. The capital plan is mainly funded via loans, which at the start of the year amounted to 26.1 million. The current forecast is that our loans will reduce to 22.6 million this year. And what that reflects is the repayment of loans that have matured, and due to the increased production in our capital programme, it's not been necessary to replace them. Of the loans outstanding, they're all on fixed rate terms, although 9 million of those mature within the next 12 months. Again, what that reflects is us taking advantage of low interest rates. We are carefully monitoring that, and we use Treasury management advisors to ensure that our exposure to interest rate fluctuations is carefully managed. So that provides an update on this financial year, and I'm happy to take any questions that members may have.
Thank you, Helen. Members, Owen, got a question?
So, yes, thank you, Chair. With the forecast is that the bank rates could go up to 0.5 and then maybe up to 1 by the end within the next 12 months. How would we fare on that in our budgets and things? Thank you.
Thank you. That's an excellent question. I don't have the absolute figures to hand, but I would like to confirm that it is carefully monitored. At the moment, those fixed term, the 9 million in fixed term due to mature within the 9 months, within the next 12 months, is being carefully monitored. And we've got two options. We can either replace that with longer dated, and we'll do that if it's appropriate at the time, or alternatively, we can replace it with further short dated. But again, to give some assurance, we do have an earmarked reserve on the balance sheet so that if it does move against us, we've got that financial buffer to support that.
Does that answer your question, Owen? Okay, thank you. Can I invite Councillor Brian Apsley with his question?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Good morning. Just a quick question on the vacancies. What percentage of the total workforce are the vacancies, please?
Thank you. I don't actually have that figure to hand. And I guess our workforce divides into different cohorts. In terms of the whole-time firefighters, that is a very, very small percentage. And we're planning to go through a recruitment process in April of next year. The main area of risk for us relates to the retained vacancies. And we're really focusing all of our efforts at the moment in targeting areas locally, trying to work as adaptively and flexibly as we can to improve that, and also ensure that we've got the training provision for them. So I think it's fair to say the recruitment of retained will be a continued focus for us next year. In terms of corporate services staff, again, it's a very low percentage, but I think it's fair to say that it's ensuring that we've got the resilience in our teams to make sure that where we do have a vacancy, that the work continues and that we don't expose ourselves unduly to risk on service delivery.
Happy with that?
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Right, Councillor Rondo Roberts, you've got a question for Helen?
Yeah, good morning. Thank you, Chair. It's just, Owen's covered one of the questions I was going to raise in relation to interest rates. But the other one is, have you got any news on the pay increase discussion that's been going on, and what contingency plans you'll have in place if there was to be a strike?
Thank you. The pay negotiations at the moment are in relation to the local government or staff on local government contracts. At the moment, the individual unions are balloting their members, and internally within the organisation, we're doing a piece of work to look at the effect that may have, and also put the contingency arrangements in place. So it's very much our business continuity work is ongoing at the present time, and I think it's just highly unfortunate at this stage that negotiations haven't appeared to reach a satisfactory resolution for all parties.
Thank you.
What contingencies have been discussed, perhaps, and can you enlighten us on that?
Yes, of course. It's looking at those areas. So if you look at so finance and payroll, it's making sure that we've got provision to carry on paying our staff, looking at the suppliers, because what we don't want to do is to put our suppliers under undue financial pressure. So it's just making sure that with the staff who won't be affected by the strike, that we've got sufficient arrangements in place.
What about the staff that will be affected by a strike and the cover of basically putting out fires?
Sorry, the staff involved in the local staff aren't operational staff. So the ballot at the present time relates to local government staff only. Those under what we call grey book terms and conditions, which are your operational staff, aren't within scope at this present time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Mary, yes, Mary Davis.
Diolch yn fawr, bore da, Helen. Dim ond holi dwi, pa adroddiad sydd yn dangos arbedion ar deithio aelodau I bwyllgorau a'r gweithwyr hefyd o achos Covid-19?
Thank you, Councillor Davis. The cost associated with members travelling to meetings is normally subsumed into the budget heading of staff costs. So the underspend on our pay costs will incorporate that.
Okay, thank you. I'll ask our Deputy Chair, Dylan Rees, to ask this question.
Thank you for your report, Helen. I think you mentioned that we'd received some income from the Welsh Ambulance Service in terms of the services that we provided. I understand that we've just responded to a request from the Health Board to make some staff available to help with the booking procedure for COVID vaccinations, and it's great to hear that we're involved in partnership working and helping other agencies in that way. I presume then that we'll also get some income back from the supply of those services. Am I correct?
Very much so. The focus last week when the request came in was ensuring that we could identify staff who could help and support. Behind the scenes, our finance team and their finance team are sort of unpicking the detail of that. So yes, in principle, at the moment we don't have an absolute figure, but it was very much around ensuring that we could support that effort, because overall that's the right thing to do for our communities.
Thank you. Can I bring Chief Fire Officer in? Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for mentioning that we are trying to assist the Health Board, and what I can assure you is it's not for the income. It's the right thing to do, and we've put arrangements in place that if we have any additional costs, they will be met by the Health Board, but any costs that we would normally incur, we will pick up those ourselves. I think it's the case that we all need to play our parts at this time.
Thank you, Chief, for that update. Well, I have no further questions from members, so can I take you to the recommendations, which are on page 14, and that is to note the draft revenue and capital outturn projections for the 21-22 financial year, and also to approve the budget realignment request. Could I have a proposer and seconder for that, please? Thank you, Michael. Michael Dixon.
I'll second it.
Thank you, John Brimore Hughes. Okay, if you raise your hand to approve. Thank you. Right, we'll now move on to item 9, and this is the Firefighters pension scheme internal dispute resolution procedure. So Helen, you guide us through this, please.
I think you've let me off the hook quite lightly there. I think the next item on the agenda is the medium-term financial plan. I think very kindly.
I beg your pardon.
That's okay. This item is that time of year where we both look backwards in terms of the current year, but we also need to look forwards in terms of the next financial year and beyond. And the second financial paper on the agenda today relates to the budget for 2022-23 and also that medium-term financial plan. By way of a background, we're required to set a balanced budget each year, and that's also to confirm the provisional contribution figures with each local authority by the 31st of December. And in setting a balanced budget, we need to understand our key cost drivers. Do we know what costs we're incurring, and also the associated risks and uncertainties that we're facing to achieve our objectives? I think it's fair to say that the external environment has been extremely challenging, not only this year, but last year, and I think it will continue to be so for the future. That's ranged from being able to recruit during periods of lockdown through to inflation and supply chain issues. What I'd like to do is to talk about the revenue costs for next year first, then turn to the capital, and then focus on the medium-term financial plan. In terms of the revenue, the paper today builds on and brings together a number of reports that members will have already be familiar with. I'll reference the Chief Fire Officer's update to the authority in September, which highlighted the key areas of priority for us to ensure that we achieve our objectives. To revisit those, it was improving availability through addressing the retained recruitment and retention challenges. We spoke about that in the last report. It's about increasing capacity in our training function. What that relates to is not about just training new recruits, but it's also providing that breadth of training for our existing staff and maintaining that competence. Also addressing our corporate resilience and planning for the changes to the building safety regulations and that will play out across the fire and rescue sector. The budget setting paper that was presented to you in October set out our planning assumptions, and that has formed the basis of the budget setting that you're receiving today. This was also supplemented with a planning day in November, where members received detailed presentations around our pressures and our challenges. So building on that work, the overall budget requirement for the next financial year is 39.41 million. This is an increase of 2.34 million. And what I'd like to do is draw members' attention to the table in paragraph 13, and that's on page 26 of your papers. And that provides a reconciliation between the budget for 2021-22 and the proposed budget for 2022-23. To do nothing, we would require an increase of £1 million, and that's the inflationary increase for our service provision as it stands currently. But the additional investment that we do require comes to about £1.2 million. And what that provides is investment in training, operational resilience, corporate capacity, and also provision for that business fire safety. So the standstill budget is an increase of £1 million. So the additional 1.3 million relates to those investments. Of course, we do face continued risks and uncertainties. Namely, we've got our pay inflation. We've spoken about that. In our budget assessment, we've included a pay award of 2%. This remains a significant uncertainty. And each additional 1% will increase our pay costs in the order of 200,000. As the pay awards become apparent, it will be necessary to revisit this aspect of the budget and we will bring that to members during the financial year. A key area of the budget includes the recruitment for retained personnel, and work is already ongoing to support enhanced recruitment and training provision for these members of staff. This remains a significant challenge and will be carefully monitored throughout the year. Members will also note that we have grants of 2.2 million, and that includes support for pensions and also the emergency services network. Whilst we are hopeful that this money will be received from the Welsh Government, it hasn't yet been confirmed, and that amount equates to 1.5 million. The environmental challenges that we're facing aren't unique to us, and they're across the public and private sector, but they remain a key area of uncertainty. Within the budget, we've included a new role, that of an environmental and climate change manager, but no additional provision has been made for specific environmental projects. The budget includes provision for increased training capacity, and it's anticipated that a full training review will be undertaken during 2022-23, but within the budget for this year, no additional provision has been made for the outcome of that review. Inflationary and supply chain issues remain a key management focus for us. This will require ongoing action throughout the year and will need to be carefully managed. Further reports of issues will be brought to the attention of members throughout the financial year. Turning to the capital programme, I think it's fair to say that this has been extremely difficult to manage throughout the COVID pandemic, and these challenges remain. The initial challenges were the fact that we'd locked down our buildings, but the challenges now are on the supply chain, both in relation to materials, but also availability of personnel. Currently, within the capital programme, we don't have any major capital building schemes. The draft plan is just over 2.9 million, which largely relates to investment in new fire appliances. In addition, the plan includes 1.1 million rolled over from this financial year, and again, that reflected slippage due to supply issues around fire appliances. Members will note that we don't have any specific environmental projects, and this is because all capital expenditure is planned to consider the carbon footprint. And for example, moving away from diesel cars to hybrid models for our flexi-duty cohort. I'll touch briefly on the medium-term financial plan. At this time, it remains incredibly difficult due to uncertainties, not only in relation to our funding, the pay awards, and also our own internal initiatives, such as the training review, the implementation of business fire safety reforms, and any environmental projects that we progress. So therefore, the planning for 2023-24 and 2024-25 has not attempted to make any provision for these uncertainties. And instead, we've used the 2022-23 budget as the base budget and included pay awards at 2%. This will need to be revisited, revised and updated over the forthcoming 12 months as the operating environment becomes much clearer. And I'm happy to take any questions that members have on the proposed budget.
Well, thank you again, Helen, for guiding us through that document. I have a question for you from Councillor Mary Lloyd-Davies.
Diolch yn fawr eto, Mr Cadeirydd, a diolch Helen. Dwi'n wrach bod chi wedi ateb hwn yn ddiwedd eich cyflwyniad, ond o'n i ddim yn siŵr. Fel da chi'n gwybod, o'n edrych wedi gallu rhoi amcan gyfri am reolau newydd ellir ddod o adroddiad Grenfell yn Llundain. Mae ne sôn yn does wrach felly, basa mwy o waith i'r awdurdod tân oherwydd newid rheolau adeiladu. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. If I can refer you to, and I'm just desperately searching through my papers, there is a table within the report, and you will see that we've made some provision for business fire safety, but that isn't going to be the full provision because the exact requirements aren't yet known. And I don't know if one of my colleagues would like to provide further information on the plans over the forthcoming 12 months.
I'll bring Richard Fairhead in at this point, if I may. Richard?
Okay, thank you, Chair. As has been identified, there's lots of work that's been gone on since the Grenfell fire 3 years ago. Publication of the Hackett report, and then the publication of a white paper in Wales, which is looking at building safety for buildings that have residential aspects to them. So what we're currently doing is working with Welsh Government and colleagues in Wales about looking about what volume of work that might mean for the Fire and Rescue Service. We do believe that there will be an increase in the amount of audits and work we have to do in the planning phases for all these buildings. We're currently undergoing a review of what we currently have in business fire safety, with a view then to looking at what sort of structure we might need to put in place to meet the needs when the legislation in Wales changes, which is potentially going to be happening in the next 12 months.
Thank you, Richard. Happy with that. Thank you, Mary. I've got a question now from Councillor Brian Apsley.
Thank you, Chair. On page 32, it mentions inflation at over 3%. An average increase of 3%. And I noticed the budget forecast for 2022-23 would mean a 6% increase. I know that there's a request from local authorities for, the local authorities will be obliged to increase by over 6%. Where would the total finance come from to balance the books?
Thank you, Councillor Apsley. I think it's worth really referring back to page 26, and within paragraph 13, that breaks down the increase, and the 3% increase, which is the inflationary uplift, equates to £1 million. The additional increase over and above that relates to the new investment, and that brings in new members of staff. It builds a resilience. In terms of where that money comes from, both the Chief Fire Officer has been liaising with Chief Executives, and I've been liaising with the Directors of Finance to make them aware of our proposed budget requirement. And ultimately, until the Welsh Government settlement is approved today, it's unknown how much that will increase by. So at the present time, I can give you an assurance that the Chief Executives are aware of the budget requirements. So too are the Directors of Finance from local authorities. But ultimately, that will be included in their financial planning as well.
Okay, thank you. I have no further hands up, so can I take you to the recommendations on page 24? There are 3 parts to it. Approve the capital and revenue budget for 22-23 based on an increase in contributions from constituent authorities of 2.34 million. And the second part, to note the key risks and uncertainties identified during the budget planning process. And thirdly, endorse the medium-term financial strategy. Do I have a proposer?
Move, Chair.
Thank you. Seconder? Thank you. If you'd like to, all in favour? Thank you. We'll now move on to the item I was so keen to get to, and that is the Firefighters Pension Scheme's internal dispute resolution procedure. So, Helen?
Thank you, Chair. I have 3 pension papers on the agenda today, and I'm sure that members will be aware from their own authorities how challenging this environment is at the present time. I'm going to ease you in gently because I'm going to start with the internal dispute resolution process, as this is a relatively straightforward report and a short item, known as IDRP for short. Whilst it's hoped that our schemes are well managed, our communication is robust, and we're fair in the application of the rules, I think we need to acknowledge that there will be occasions whereby individuals or groups of individuals are unhappy with the way that things are or wish to raise a complaint. And in those circumstances, it's absolutely just and appropriate that they afforded that opportunity. The pension regulations require scheme managers, so for the Firefighters pension scheme, that's yourselves, to have a complaint scheme in place. And although the regulations are not prescriptive about what that might look like, the Welsh Government has provided guidance. This isn't new guidance. It's been tweaked slightly this year, but essentially there are 2 stages. So stage 1 is that an individual is required to put their complaint in writing using a prescribed process, and that on the first stage is considered by the Chief Fire Officer. And there are timescales that we need to comply with. If the complainant remains dissatisfied, there is what's known as a stage 2. And that's where the matter is escalated and it's considered by a panel of members acting on behalf of the scheme manager. We already have that mechanism in place, and currently the stage 2 would be considered by the chair. And what the proposal is today is that is widened. So it's widened to include the chair, the deputy chair, and also an employer member from the local pension board. A member from the local pension board will have the detailed pensions knowledge because they're required to complete the pensions regulator training. And also further assistance can be provided by the monitoring officer as appropriate. So the recommendation is today is for yourselves to adopt that proposal in relation to the second stage.
Thank you, Helen. I haven't seen any rush to raised hands, but can I, from the chair, propose that the chair of audit actually be the third member of that team? But can I invite Anne Davis to, she has a question for you. Thank you, Councillor Anne.
Mr. Cadeirydd. Just a quick question. Do we know how many complaints we've had, say, in the last 12 months? And how many were unfounded of, you know, the results? Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you. Councillor Davis, each complaint is prepared and presented to the local pension board, because they do receive an update. I would suggest, certainly since I've been in post for 3.5 years, I think we've had about 4. We had one item that was upheld, that went through stage 1, stage 2, and it was a highly complex area. And eventually the pensions ombudsman found in favour of the complainant. That was highly technical and related to the RDS modified scheme back in 2015. So I think by way of an assurance, a very small number of complaints come through, and largely they are able to be addressed.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Could I have a seconder to my proposal? Thank you, Deputy Chair. So it take you back to the recommendation then that members endorse the proposed changes to stage 2 of the IDRP arrangements, and that the chair of audit is the additional employer representative to sit on the panel. So would somebody actually propose that? Thank you, Merrick, that recommendation, and seconded. Thank you. All in favour? Thank you. We'll move on to item 10, that's age discrimination in the Firefighters pension scheme.
Thank you.
Busy morning for you, Helen.
Absolutely. I did say I was going to ease you in gently. I think it's fair to say that this paper on the agenda is probably the most technical. It's an issue that members will be familiar with, because I think this is probably the third paper that I've brought in as many meetings. And you will know that the High Court judgment in December 2018 in relation to the age discrimination in the Firefighters pension scheme was won by the FBU on behalf of their claimants and was lost by the government. What is a complex area has been made more complex, as the government has confirmed that the judgment will apply across the public sector. So to put that in context, it'll apply across the local government, civil service, the NHS, and the military, to name but a few. Having lost the High Court judgment, it's now incumbent on the government to sort it out, basically. And sorting it out is known as remedy. And whilst the principles of remedy have been agreed and seem quite straightforward, it's necessary to make some legislative changes to allow this to take place. Refer you to paragraph 11 of the report, and that does set out the key principles of remedy. 3 key principles. From the 1st of April next year, all members will transfer into the career average scheme, irrespective of their previous protections. So under the age discrimination, some people, due to their age, they stayed in their legacy scheme, whilst others moved directly into the career average, and some were in a halfway position, they tapered in. So from the 1st of April next year, across all of the public sector schemes, people will move into career average. We have what's known as a period of remedy, and that is from April 2015 through to March 2022. And all eligible members will be transferred back to their legacy scheme for that period of remedy. So irrespective of whether they stayed there anyway or they transferred into career average, they'll go back in. And the third strand of remedy is that when retiring, eligible members may elect to have the pension accrued during the remedy period as either legacy or care scheme as career average. So you will appreciate that this is from an administrative point of view, going to be hugely cumbersome. And it's also, it's very difficult for people to get their heads around and understand. So dealing with the first one first, the Welsh Government has issued draft regulations to move the active members into the Firefighters Pension Scheme 2015 from April 22. The Welsh Government is consulting on the implementation of these regulations, and our proposed response is set out in Appendix 1. The consultation closes today, and there's nothing particularly contentious in that. So, sorry, excuse me. Whilst the principles of the final two elements of the remedy appear to be relatively straightforward, the time scales mean that the remedy may not be fully applied until October 2023. So main reason for that is we've got the bill, and that will receive royal assent next year. Once the bill has received royal assent, it's necessary then to put the scheme regulations in place. Furthermore, there are some really complex tax issues that need to be resolved. So as much as we need a pensions bill to sort the pension aspect, we also need updates to the finance bill to sort the tax elements. That isn't a problem for those individuals who are looking to retire until October 2023, but it is really, really problematic for those individuals who've reached natural retirement age and want to go. Those members are known as being under immediate detriment. So recognising that October 23 is quite some way away, the FBU issued a High Court proceedings. And the reason for doing that was to seek a judgment requiring fire authorities to process cases before the regulations were finalised. And in simplistic terms, what the FBU was saying is, you know what the remedy is going to look like, and we think you need to get on and do it for those members who are looking to retire. They were due to be heard in the High Court in October of this year. And to avoid that litigation, the FBU, in conjunction with the Local Government Association, agreed a framework. And that framework could be used by all fire authorities. And it was really a pragmatic way forward. It's not mandatory, but it does allow for the issue of immediate detriment cases to be addressed, and therefore will reduce that litigation risk. If we were having this discussion about 3 weeks ago, I would have been saying, we've tested the framework, our administrators have looked at it, and although it's time consuming, it's manageable for us. However, since that time, HM Treasury and HMRC has issued a further note advising that the tax consequences are more complex than initially envisaged, and the processing of immediate detriment cases may give rise to financial risks, and those financial risks are that we can't unpick the tax aspects of it. So it relates to backdated lump sums and tax relief provided to members on pension contributions. You will appreciate that this places us in a really difficult and extremely difficult position. On the one hand, there's a litigation risk if we don't process immediate detriment cases, but on the other hand, there may be financial risks if we do. And at the time of writing this paper, further legal advice had been sought from the LGA in relation to the HMRC paper. This was actually received after hours on Friday evening, so very much an evolving situation. I've definitely read through that legal advice, although I've not yet undertaken a full assessment of it. But what it does confirm is that the authority has the legal powers to process immediate detriment. So effectively, it's saying you can, but actually you need to be mindful of the fact that there are financial risks. Currently, we haven't finalised that financial impact of those risks, but we're seeking further advice across the sector with tax advisors. So it's one of those at the moment, we've gone to the legal advisors who've said, yes, you've got the powers, but there are tax consequences. So we're now seeking further assurance from tax advisors. So I've used the word evolving before, but it very much is on a day-by-day, week-by-week basis. It is evolving, and it is affecting the whole of the sector. Within the report, we're asking members to approve the principle of processing immediate detriment cases in accordance with that the LGA-FBU framework, but not until such time as the final assessment of risk has been undertaken in conjunction with the tax advisors. And I'm happy to take any queries or comments on the report. You're on mute, Councillor Lewis.
There we are. Thank you, Helen. I think it illustrates the problems you have with this when, you know, the goalposts, as it were, keep shifting. And I just wondered whether or not you thought we needed to add any additional recommendation in the light of the changing scene, or whether or not there's enough there going forward. So whilst you perhaps reflect on that, I've got a question from Councillor Mary Gloyd-Davies.
Diolch yn fawr, Mr Cadeirydd, eto. Dim ond cynigiad sy'n gynnau, dweud y gwir, i ychwanegu at yr argymhellion os gai, sef argymhelliad 4. Dwi'n teimlo fasa'r dirprwy gadeirydd gyda'r cadeirydd yn gymorth i'r dirprwy gadeirydd petai o mewn blynyddoedd i ddod yn gadeirydd, mi fasa fo wedi gwneud y gwaith yma o flaen llaw hefo chi. Diolch yn fawr.
Well, I think if you think of the previous item that we discussed, the chair and deputy chair were involved with those pension recommendations. And unless I get guidance from Helen elsewhere, I would have thought, you know, your point is actually covered there.
Yes, I think that would be a sensible way forward, and it provides that flexibility that once we've got all of the advice, we can come back to yourselves and progress with that. And I think it's really important to recognise that we're in a good position, that we don't have an awful lot of a high number of members of staff, but for those involved, I think it's quite a stressful situation that they find themselves in. So I think Councillor Davies's recommendation would be a good one.
Okay, thank you. Somebody prepared to second that then? That involves the chair, deputy chair. And yes, thank you, Brian. Right, well, if I take you to the recommendations, which are on page 41, they're itemised there, 4 items. I don't propose reading them out to you, but they're itemised. Somebody would like to propose, please? Thank you, Mary. Seconded. Thank you, Michael Dixon. All in favour? Thank you. So we'll move on to the final pension paper today, and that's the local government pension scheme discretionary policy. So Helen, guide us again.
Thank you very much. It's a move away from Firefighters pension scheme. When joining the organisation, our staff either join the Firefighters pension scheme if they're operational. If they're not operational, they join what's known as the local government pension scheme. Slightly different arrangements, and it's a slightly different fund. We're a member of the Clwyd Pension Fund, which is managed by Flintshire Council, and the rules of the scheme are codified in the pension regulations, but what they have are some elements that remain discretionary, and that allows individual employers to decide how they wish to treat certain matters. So it's really good practice to have a discretionary policy, because what that actually does is provides that framework of decision making, and it allows members to consider how people will be treated. So the report in front of you today, we already have a discretionary policy. It's a review and revision of that discretionary policy, and it sets out 18 discretions that have previously been considered by the authority. Really good practice to review them on a cyclical basis, to ensure that they remain valid, appropriate, and fit for purpose. So underpinning most of these discretions is the key principle that the authority does not generally incur additional costs by enhancing an individual's pension. So to give you an example, where an individual buys added years, we don't actually make good, we don't put an additional contribution in from the employer's side. Similarly, where an individual suffers an actuarial reduction, we don't generally waive that reduction. The discretion today do allow individuals to make additional voluntary contributions at no cost to the authority. And the proposed change is the implementation of a shared cost ABC, which is cost neutral. It's a scheme run by our tax advisors, and it allows individuals to benefit from reduced tax payments and also national insurance. Some of the discretions themselves are quite technical, such as allowing members who are deferred members to rejoin outside of the timescales. And again, as this would create a cost to the authorities not previously been adopted. Similarly, for those members who join our scheme and wish to transfer their benefits from another scheme, they have 12 months to start that process. I think 12 months is very reasonable, but we do recognise within the discretions that we won't generally extend that unless the individual can demonstrate that they were not aware of the need, or indeed that for whatever reason there's been a legitimate reason for the delay. Discretion 10 and 11 relate to forfeiture of pensions in cases of criminal acts or misconduct in relation to their employment and pension. So discretions 10 and 11 provide that safety net to the authority that if somebody does find themselves in prison as a consequence of something they've done arising from their employment, we're not under an obligation to pay the pension. So I won't go through each of the 18 discretions individually, but I am happy to take any comments or queries from members.
Well, thank you, Helen, and I'm sure Fire Authority members are grateful for your expertise in guiding us through these papers. I think the Appendix 1 and 2 there lay out the complexities there. I have no raised hands questions to you, so can I go to the recommendations then on page 47, which is to approve each discretionary resolution to be incorporated into the services LGPS discretionary policy. Can I have a proposer, please?
Move, Chair.
Thank you, Brian, and seconded by Rhonda Roberts. Okay, all in favour? Thank you. Thank you, Helen, for your marathon this morning.
Thank you.
So I can't see him, but I assume he's still on his telephone to take the next item, which is the review of the Constitution of the Fire and Rescue Authority. And at this point, can I again thank the Standard Committee members that contributed to the discussion. And Gareth, obviously you've briefed members prior to this meeting, but would you like to take us through this item, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Members, I am still without my internet connection, so I have no access to the papers either, as well as not being able to access the meeting. However, broadly speaking, the issues were relatively straightforward. Members will recall that we took the opportunity prompted by the passing of the Local Government and Elections Act to review our constitution and to look at, firstly, drafting a multi-locations meeting policy, which is required, but secondly, also looking to modernise the language within the document and to update references within the document. So, for example, statutory references, job titles, and so on. And we have also, there are some what I call administrative changes required by the Act. We've taken the opportunity to introduce those as well. And an example of that would be records of decision. After a meeting now, within 7 days, the authority and councils must publish a record of a decision, shows who is present, any declarations of interest that were taken. So, Chair, we convened a small working group to look at that, largely based, it must be said, ex officio. So we had yourself and the Deputy Chair. We had the Chair of the Audit Committee, the Chair of the Standards Committee, and so that we had an odd number. We asked for one extra member to join, and Councillor Mary Lloyd Davis volunteered. So we had a panel of 5. like to say thank you first for the work that you did as a panel, because the document is very lengthy, and we went through it several times without any complaint, it must be said. So very grateful to the members of the panel for their input. We looked first at the multi-locations meeting policy. A very strong preference came through there, Chair, for meetings in person. People value the contact, the interaction, the opportunity to talk beforehand. But there was a recognition at the time that technology would not allow, and might well not allow, us to meet in person prior to new authority, because difficulties of getting hybrid meetings where some members are present and some members are remotely working, because of the complexities involved in that. Well, that was what, 2 months ago, I think, when we met and we were looking at that. Of course, at the time, it was in the back of our minds that there might be a resurgence of the virus, which has since transpired. So, of course, we do not know what the COVID situation will be between now and the end of this authority term. So there was an acceptance, albeit somewhat reluctant, I think, forced upon us by circumstances, that for the remainder of this authority term, it is very likely that meetings will take place entirely remotely until such time as the authority can either install its own technology to enable hybrid meetings, or until constituent councils have that technology installed and fully up and running. As part of looking at the multi-locations meeting policy, Chair, we also looked at, and we followed statutory guidance on what we needed to consider, and we therefore looked at public access to those meetings. Of course, fire authority meetings are all open to the public, although I don't think anybody has chosen to attend from the public for a long time now. Whilst meetings have been taking place remotely, we have, of course, been recording them and putting them onto the authority's website. But there has been no opportunity for members of the public to actually participate in meetings. And a quick review of practice in other authorities revealed that it was common for a small amount of public participation to be allowed. And so we looked at, or the working group looked at, a selection of different options for what might be permitted or should be permitted, and agreed, and I'm recommending in the papers, that members of the public be allowed to submit questions to meetings in relation to an item that is on the agenda for that meeting, or that they be allowed to make representations, again, in relation to the agenda for that meeting. So, because it's in relation to items on the agenda, we've got fairly short timescales for the public to be able to do that, but that's because of the fact that the agenda isn't published until 3 days before it takes place in any event. So we need to be able to publish an agenda in order to prompt somebody or allow somebody to see what's on the agenda and then to ask their question or indicate that they wish to make a representation. And Chair, as might be expected, and this is fairly common in constituent councils, we've got a power vested in the office of Chair to control the way that that takes place, so that we don't have, so that meetings aren't overly dominated. So there's a if somebody is to make representations or to ask questions, there's a maximum period of time that's permitted papers, and you have the choice about how you control and manage that as Chair in order to make sure that the business is transacted smoothly. In addition, Chair, we modernised the language, so we went through the document. There are various references in there, recording things within a book, or them being open to inspection at the authority's offices. which clearly don't work in COVID times, in lockdown. So we've modernised those just so that things will be available electronically. And we have also, as I mentioned, gone through, checked statutory references, updated those, checked job titles. So if members, for example, look at the contract procedure rules, you'll see there that we now that we've changed quite a few references in there to job titles in order that they reflect current post titles within the authority. I've produced a list of the changes so that members can see what the document said before, what we were proposing to change it to, and those proposals are listed within a tracked changes version of the document as well, so that if members wanted to see it, how it will look, it's there. And indeed, for the sake of making, for clarity and to try and make it easier to read, we've also attached, I think, or circulated around separately to members, a clean version of the document so that members can either look at the evolution of the document or they can see what it is going to say, assuming that all the changes are agreed, and they are there. This morning, Chair, or yesterday evening, I should say, I had an email from the Chair of the Standards Committee. One of the independent members on the committee had looked through the document, has spotted an inconsistency. Page 25, paragraph 1, sets out the frequency of Standards Committee meetings, and there it says at least one meeting per year. Subsequently, the document does say that the committee meets twice a year. Well, twice is at least once, but what we do, about 12 months ago, 18 months ago, I think it was, Chair, we agreed that the Standards Committee would meet twice a year, simply so that it can get through that rolling review of the Constitution that it undertakes to check that it's all up to date and still pertinent in a reasonable time frame. If it only meets once a year, it's very difficult to try and conduct those changes, because if a member were to make a suggestion, say in January of 2021, it would be January 2022 before they get to see those changes reflected in the document, and that makes that very difficult. It also doesn't give enough meat. So, Chair, that's all I wanted to say. Matt, as the Deputy Clerk, was present at those meetings as well. In a moment, if I might, I'll invite him to supplement anything that I might have missed. And between us, Chair, we will field questions if there are any.
Thank you. Well, at this point, Gareth, can I thank you for giving that presentation this morning, but also in guiding the working group in order to be able to make the recommendations today. So thank you for that. I haven't got any questions raised. So in the absence of any other amendment to the recommendations that appear on page 59, I would just like to add one, and that is in connection with the 2, which states working group be thanked for their work. I would also like to add those staff members who scanned the document and prepared the changes to enable the working group to make the recommendations. I think anybody that has looked at the changes or whatever, and the concentration must have been needed in order to make sure that all the I's and T's were on the T dotted. I think you know, we should thank them as well. So I would like to add that in terms of item 2. And the first part is the multi-location meetings policy and revised constitution be approved. So do I have a recommendation?
Cynnig, Mr. Cadeirydd.
Thank you. Has been seconded. Yep, thank you. All in favour? Thank you. And I think you're going to take item 13, which is a verbal report, Gareth, in terms of members' register of interest and related party transactions.
Indeed. This is an annual report and an annual reminder, Chair. Members, and I'll explain fully just in case people are watching on the webcast. And members, when they join the authority, need to complete a register of interests under the Code of Conduct. Requires them to list certain things, such as where they live, and specifically with relevance to this item, any contracts that they have between themselves and the authority. Now, Chair, that overlaps with something that we ask of members each year, or require of members for our statement of accounts each year, which is a statement of related party transactions, which details any contracts between members and the authority. So what we do, Chair, is we take the opportunity to combine the two of those. So we ask that each year members update and refresh their register of interest, which is good practice, because of course you are required to do so within 28 days of a change, but it never hurts to be prompted. And also we have included within that the required questions for the auditing our statement of accounts, because the two are very similar. Now, Chair, the required statement for auditing the accounts, the related party transaction statement, is an essential part of auditing the accounts. The auditors will not sign off our accounts without it. And one year we did have some difficulties in getting the accounts process concluded because we didn't have all of the member statements that we needed. There was a member who had left the authority and thought, therefore, that because he'd left, he didn't need to fill it in anymore, but the auditors were insistent that he did. And it took some effort. It's fair to say, in order to be able to get that statement and to be able to get the accounts signed off. So when those documents do come round to members, we ask that they are returned promptly. That would assist greatly so that we can have our accounts externally. Happy to take any questions, Chair?
Well, thank you, Gareth. And I think it's important that even if there's a nil return, that members actually respond to that effect.
Yes, Chair, it is. Thank you.
So I'm sure members will take that guidance on board when they're next presented with the request. So I've got no questions, and I'm sure members will note Gareth's report there. So we'll move on to item 14, which is really just to list the meeting dates for 2022. So would you like to take this, Gareth, please?
Yes, Chair, quite happy to take this one. As you say, we have listed the meetings. You'll notice that we have changed some of the frequencies and significantly that audit and exec panel will take place. It's proposed on the same day, so audit would be in the meeting, exec panel would be in the afternoon. And that's to fit around the statutory timetables that we have. It also coincides with meetings of the management team so that there is a smooth flow of information and that where we need to approve something by a statutory deadline, we do so within the required times. Chair, I don't know whether Alwyn or ACFO MacArthur wanted to add anything.
Well, okay. I think it's a credit to dates in advance, and it's disappointing to me that given the notice we give for the various committees as well as the Fire Authority meeting, that we have the absence level sometimes at meetings that we do. And can I encourage members that that whilst obviously some of them there might be changes in May, but can I encourage you to actually put them those dates in your diary in advance, so that there's a fair chance that your own local authority officers might be mindful of that when they come to organise their own meetings. So,
Chair, yes, we do share those with the heads of democratic services as well, and ask them, particularly fire authority meetings, for meetings of the full authority, to protect those dates within their calendars. It would be difficult across 7 authorities, I think, for us never to have a clash with any meeting. There are only so many days in the week after all, but yes, full fire authority meetings do ask that the constituent councils protect those dates within their own diary so that there isn't a clash.
Okay, thank you. Got no questions on the date. So before we actually move it into part 2, and I ask proposer and seconder for that, I think as chair of the Fire Authority, I would like, first of all, to thank the presenters for their reports today, as has happened throughout the year. And I would like to, first of all, propose season's greetings to you as Fire Authority members and the support you've given me over the last 12 months. But also I would like, on behalf of the Fire Authority, to send season's greetings to all our staff in the fire service and the contribution that they make. So now Doris Llawen, a blessed New Year, Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to you all. So if I could now invite somebody to propose and second that we go into, thank you, Mary, and seconded, thank you, Michael. So whilst we stop